Hello, welcome to Hansraj e-Samvaad, a center for digital content creation established under the aegis of Mahatma Hansraj Faculty Development Center and the Ministry of Education, Government of India. At Hansraj e-Samvaad, we deliver well-researched and specialized teaching content for students and scholars. It's a unique initiative by Hansraj College, University of Delhi, to make knowledge accessible to all. I welcome you to this lecture. My name is Piyush Chaudhary. I am an assistant professor at the Department of English at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. Today, we will discuss the lecture. This lecture will be on Premchand's short story, Deliverance. Of course, the readers would know the name Premchand, a very familiar name, indeed. And indeed, he was one of the greatest fiction writers in Hindi language. He wrote for over 30 years, and he has written more than 300 short stories, almost 14 or 15 novels, several articles, and he even was a playwright. His major works primarily focus on social realism, social injustice, the pains and the poverty, and the oppressive caste forces. Premchand even wrote melodramas, he wrote nationalist stories as well, and was indeed one of the major writers of the 20th century. Premchand basically wrote about the social evils that he witnessed, in his life to sensitize the readers to the evils of life. He wrote on poverty, he wrote on caste, he wrote on patriarchy, education, and in a way he was also deeply interested in the everyday social fabric, of our society. He was interested in the daily, ordinary lives of the Indians. He was interested in human characters and what makes them human. And Premchand wrote with much simplicity. And this is exactly what makes his work accessible to all and even widely read. So with this, I'll introduce the story. That was just a brief introduction about Premchand. Let me now begin with the short story, that is Deliverance or Sadgati. So in just a minute or two, I'll give you, a very detailed crux of the story in a short introduction. So basically the story Deliverance is a story about unpaid labor, about the hardships that Dalits or the untouchables had to go through. It is a story of discrimination and exploitation in the name of caste. It is a story of the internalization of caste-based discriminations in the mind of the lower castes. In this story, the poor conditions of the lower castes are shown. The story shows the hardships that Dalits had to face at the hands of the upper caste, who exploited them in the name of religion. Due to caste structures and demarcations of hierarchy, the character of Dukhi, he is the main character, he goes through a series of painful ordeals at the hands of the upper caste of the area, the local Pandit, Pandit Ghasiram. The name of the untouchable is Dukhi, and Dukhi, the name itself represents sorrow, pain. So he is on the lookout for possible dates of marriage for his daughter from the local priest, Pandit Ghasiram. He goes to meet the Pandit to ask for dates so that he can fix the marriage of his daughter. And what the Pandit does is, the Pandit asks him to work in severely excruciating circumstances without giving him any food, without giving him any water. And as a result of the hardships and the extreme amount of physical labor which was inflicted on him by the Pandit, the character Dukhi falls unconscious in the ground and ultimately he dies. So this is in short, the entire crux of the story. With this, let me go on to the detailed summary of the story, and I'll also discuss some major themes thereafter. Right? So now a detailed summary. So the story opens with the character of Dukhi, who was weeping the front door while his wife Jhuria, she was plastering the floor. The couple meet, they talk about fixing the marriage date of their daughter with the local Pandit of their area, and the wife says that they will have to arrange meals for the Pandit, and they both plan out, they chalk out a full meal for the, Pandit. Then there is a description, as the story moves forward, there is a description of the godlike Pandit and his various religious rituals and the preparation of his daily puja. And the Pandit in the story, he is described in godly terms, right? So what I'll do is I'll just show you a brief description of Pandit Ghasiram, and this is how the lines go. Pandit Ghasiram was completely devoted to God. As soon as he awoke, he would busy himself with his rituals. After washing his hands and feet, at 8 o'clock he would begin the real ceremony of worship, the first part of which consisted of the preparation of bhang. On his chest and arms, he would draw designs of perfect circles. How godly a sight! A rather short, roly-poly fellow with a bald, shiny skull, chubby cheeks and eyes aglow with Brahmanical energy the sandalwood markings bestowed on him the aspect of the gods. Right? So Premchand writes how godly a sight. Okay, so he has written how godly a sight. So this is written in an ironic tone here, a satiric tone here, and this is the way how Premchand ensures that the reader does not share the view. So by the description and by describing the Pandit in such a godly sight, the readers realize that the author Premchand is juxtaposing two different situations. How? It is juxtaposed with the pathetic conditions of Dukhi, the untouchable, who cannot even afford two square meals. So this makes the reader realize the totally, I would say, the contrasting ways of living of the two characters. So there is a huge contrast, right? The Pandit is in his godly avatar, in full regalia, in full colors, in full glory. But Dukhi is living a life of poverty, who is struggling to earn two square meals, isn't it? So Premchand is deliberately doing this. This juxtaposition is created so that the readers realize, the starkly contrasting manner in which these two sections of society lived. Why? Because of the demarcations, of caste, because of discriminations that caste has imposed. Thus, as the story moves forward, Dukhi meets the Pandit and asks him for a date for his daughter's marriage. He agrees, but he first asks him to work and plaster the floor of the house. And then also he was ordered to cut the big log of wood. So Dukhi started working and he kept working till noon. But he was not able to cut the wood as he was not very strong physically. He was tired and he wanted to smoke tobacco. And then he asks for a fire from the Pandit's wife. And we see how in the discriminatory manner in which the wife responds to Pandit. She says, and I'm reading again, "You have forgotten all about caste rules. If there's tanner or a washerman or a bird catcher, why he can just come walking right into the house as though he owned it? You'd think it was an inn and not a decent Hindu's house. Tell that good for nothing to get out or I'll scorch his face with a firebrand." So she rebukes and humiliates the untouchable tanner, and this allows Premchand to show the discrimination that these untouchables face on a day-to-day basis. Then we notice that the Pandit is eating his full meal while the untouchable tanner is not given anything to eat. He keeps working in the harsh sun while the master Pandit is now asleep. Right? Then comes a very interesting character. His name is Chikuri. He is a member of the Gond tribe, and he sees him working very hard and he rebukes and abuses the Brahmin Pandit. And in the characters of Dukhi and the fellow tribal Chikuri, there is a contrast. This is the main contrast is in their position vis-a-vis the caste-based hierarchies. Chikuri is an outsider. Dukhi is an insider and a sufferer. But the character of Chikuri is important here because he can upset the caste-based hierarchies to some extent. He is the only one who refutes and hates the Pandit. Right? He is also not within the Hindu fold. He is a member of the tribe. He is a member of the Gond tribe. Right? And therefore, he is a tribal member and not part of the stratified Hindu caste system. Therefore, what I'm trying to say is that his rebellion is possible as he is not an untouchable and is outside the Hindu caste system. But the rebellion from Dukhi is not really possible. It's not easy. And so seeing Dukhi tired and exhausted, he tried to help him, but they were not able to break the wood, and hence he decided, that he will leave Dukhi and then he goes away. The Pandit saw from a distance that he is not able to break the wood and warned him that if he does not do the work, then he will not fix the marriage date for his daughter. Right? And finally, Dukhi keeps on hitting the wood in exhaustion. Look at these lines to understand, the manner in which he does that. Dukhi picked up the axe again. His stomach was pasted against his backbone. He hadn't so much as eaten breakfast that morning. There wasn't any time. Just to stand up seemed an impossible task. This was the Pandit. If he didn't fix an auspicious day, the marriage would be a total failure. And that was why everybody respected the Pandits. Everything depended on getting the right day set. He could ruin anybody he wanted to. Dukhi was in delirium. Some kind of hidden power seemed to have come into his hands. The axe strokes descended one after another. He went on driving the axe in this state of intoxication until finally the log split down the middle. Dukhi's hands let the axe drop. And at the same moment, overcome with dizziness, he fell. The hungry, thirsty, exhausted body gave up. So at this point of time, Dukhi falls unconscious and dies on the spot due to extreme hunger, extreme exhaustion. And very soon everyone in the village gets to know about it, and the Gond Chikuri, he goes to inform everyone in the untouchable settlement, and he warns everyone that they should not touch the body as he has been killed by the Pandit and they might be arrested by the police, right? So no member of the lower caste came to claim the body of Dukhi. The Pandit even threatened the untouchables around, and he tried to cajole them, he tried to persuade them, but they were afraid of the police and hence they did not come to claim his body. His body started rotting, and till the next morning, the stench, the bad smell, the bad odor was spreading everywhere. Finally, Pandit himself had to do the task of removing the body. A very, you can say a very unique reversal of roles. Look at these lines to understand, what happens, and I'll discuss that. But no tanner came to get the corpse, and how could a Brahmin lift up an untouchable body? It was expressly forbidden in the scriptures, and no one could deny it. Somehow or other, they got through the night. But even in the morning, no tanner came. The stench was beginning to spread quite a bit. Panditji got out a rope. He made a noose and managed to get it over the dead man's feet and drew it tight. Panditji grabbed the rope and began to drag it, and he dragged him out of the village. While he got back, he bathed immediately, read out prayers to Durga for purification, and sprinkled Ganges water around the house. Out there in the field, the jackals and kites and the dogs and the crows were picking at Dukhi's body. This was the reward of a whole life of devotion, service, and faith. Right? So here the story ends. So the members of the untouchable community, they used to work with the dead bodies. But now can you see what's happening towards the end? It is the Pandit who is now, handling the dead bodies. So although, even though if it's, even for a fraction of a second or, for a very small period of time, but towards the end, it is Pandit now who is doing something which was always been traditionally done by the untouchable. So that is a very unique, what you can say, reversal of fortune or reversal of fate. Now the Pandit has to do the work of an untouchable, right? That is, handling a dead body, right? So he has to do the work of a tanner. A tanner too, because, because no one is coming there, right? Because the dead body, because the people were not coming because they were afraid that they will be jailed. So how Chikuri also has a role to play in the short story, because he was the one who instigated them. Right? And we have a very wonderful, very ironic, and to some extent, I would say, for want of better word, I would say a very satisfying reversal of events and fortune. Because now the Pandit has to do the work of an untouchable. Unwillingly, of course, but he has to do that. So here we come to the end of the short story Deliverance. We notice how Premchand has shown the reality of caste and how Dukhi dies a pitiful death. And the readers cannot help but feel pity for the highly devoted Dukhi, who was betrayed and killed by his own master. Let me now turn to the theme of realism and Dalit literature, and will also offer my critique of the representation of Dalit vulnerability in this short story. Right? So let me now take you to the next topic, and that is realism and Dalit literature. So Premchand, as we know, is known for realism and moral truth, depicting moral truths. He was like a sage, a saint in the Indian literature, right? That was his position. That was the way that he was perceived. For Premchand, expression of reality, it was extremely paramount. And if literature adds value to life, and it is only then that it is beneficial to human life. What I'll do is I'll just show you a quote by Premchand, and as you can see on the screen, and he says, literature properly so called is not only realistic, true to life, but is also an expression of our experiences and of the life that surrounds us. It employs easy, refined language which alike affects our intellect and our sentiments. Literature assumes these qualities only when it deals with the realities and experiences of life. Unless literature deals with reality, it has no appeal for us. And these are the quotes taken from his first, speech, his presidential speech in 1936, right? So, therefore, realism is a key feature of literature by Premchand. But here comes the interesting point. There are certain critics who believe that Premchand's realism is only half true. It's only half authentic. I will discuss this with the critical idea of the problem of categorizing Dalit literature. As we know, this is the individual and society, and in this lecture, in the previous lectures, you can watch the lectures. I'll provide the link. I have discussed on the idea of Dalit Chetna, right? So I'll once again retouch that. According to Dalit critics, Dalits understand the experience of being a Dalit. Non-Dalits do not do so. Non-Dalits are watching basically from, you can say, a glass window. They can see very clearly and they can express it too, but not 100% as they cannot feel it. And when you feel it, you develop a Dalit Chetana, or what is known as a Dalit awakening. And this is the hallmark of Dalit literature. But there is always a problem of categorizing Dalit literature, because Dalit critics believe that a non-Dalit writer can never write authentic Dalit literature. If you remember, I have discussed in the previous lectures about critics like Sharan Kumar Limbale, about critics like Arjun Dangle, and there are several other non-Dalit critics. There are several other Dalit critics who believe that those who are from the upper caste, they do not go through the experiences of untouchability, and therefore they cannot write authentic Dalit literature. So there is always this tussle which will go on forever. Dalit writers and Dalit critics have rejected the representation of Dalits as weak and helpless victim in the works of progressive upper caste writers like Premchand. So there is a contrasting difference in the way Premchand writes literature related to Dalit, and in which say if we compare it to the way Valmiki writes about the experiences of Dalit. On a brief note, the reason that Premchand and Valmiki, though both are writing about the Dalit literature, but again there is a huge difference in their ways of writing. Why so? Because one is born Dalit, the other was born in an upper caste family. Premchand can sympathize, of course, he can write wonderful stories, but he can never go through the Dalit Chetana because he has never understood the real problems that untouchables had to go through. The Dalit Chetana, Dalit consciousness is visibly absent in non-Dalit writers like Premchand, even Mulk Raj Anand. So according to Dalit critics, having Dalit Chetana is the hallmark of Dalit literature. This Dalit Chetana, this Dalit consciousness encapsulates the experiences of exploitation and helplessness. And this ultimately culminates into rage and the need for revolution. I'll show you one more quote by Professor Rajkumar, and he says, at the beginning of the 20th century, the few upper caste Hindu writers who attempted to portray the lives of the untouchables tended to be driven either by zeal for social reform or by sentimental compassion. Right? So this is exactly what Premchand is doing. You see, one is not doubting the integrity of Premchand in writing Dalit literature. I am in no way trying to do that. But the way that he is writing is far removed from the reality of Dalits. There is only, you can say, a partial truth in the description of Dukhi in the story and his reaction to the Pandit. It shows Dukhi in a pathetic state and gives a godly sight and character to the Pandit. But a non-Dalit writer might never write that way. Right? Premchand writes with pathos, emotions, pity, but Dalit critics don't want pity. Premchand almost romanticizes the character of Dukhi by showing him as someone who's broken, by showing him as someone who always is in a state of pity. This is not acceptable to Dalit critics, as it shows an unrealistic account of Dalits. So one more quote by Professor Rajkumar from the same book, and Professor Kumar says, but the novels produced by these writers can be termed as emotional literature because these Dalit characters have mostly been imagined from the upper caste writer's point of view. Therefore, these characters look totally absurd. Rarely did these writers take up any untouchable characters and treat them realistically like ordinary human beings full of vitality, hope, as well as despair. And I am quoting this from this book, which is Dalit Literature and Criticism by Rajkumar. So in contrast to this statement, we have O.P. Valmiki's Jhutan. I have already made a lecture on that, which shows the realistic details, the shame, the abuses, the humiliations, the pains and the troubles in a much more realistic manner. I have made a video on this and students can find the video in the playlist. And in that lecture, I also discussed the hard-hitting manner in which Valmiki wrote his autobiography. The characters, the language, the background of Jhutan by Valmiki is not romanticized like in Deliverance by Premchand. The character of Dukhi is romanticized with pity and pathos. We feel pathos for him. We feel pity for him. And also the way this character Dukhi is shown, he is far removed from the reality of the untouchables. Even his name is romanticized as Dukhi, someone who is in a pain, someone in sorrow. The character name is Dukhi. This name itself has a symbolic meaning, which represents the symbolically pathetic or the decadent or the very sorrowful, very painful life of the untouchable. While it is true that being an untouchable was indeed painful, it was indeed sorrowful, it was indeed humiliating, but the way Premchand writes it it makes it reductive. It becomes reductive for Dalits to treat them with pity. So therefore, this reality is only half true. So therefore, I try to explain how Premchand's description of untouchability is half true and therefore reductive. He shows Dalit characters as weak, helpless victims only, and shows no individuality or no individual character traits. Dukhi is a type basically. He's a type. He's shown as a flat character. He's shown as a weak, helpless, pitiful character. So Premchand falls short of the reality that untouchables had to go through, as his work is infused with pity and unrealistic propositions. But I am not claiming that Premchand did not write in the realist mode. He wrote completely in the realistic mode, but his stories and descriptions do not fall into the category of Dalit literature, as his realism in the case of caste is only half true. Hence, Dalit critics and Dalit writings do not consider his short stories as authentic descriptions of Dalit reality and Dalit consciousness. Why? Because Premchand lacks Dalit Chetna, Dalit consciousness in his works, primarily because he was not a Dalit himself. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. I hope the viewers got some valuable ideas and students were able to derive, something meaningful from the lecture. I'll be covering other parts of GE, individual and society, and will upload them on the YouTube channel on the same very channel soon. So keep watching and sharing this video, and I hope it helps you prepare well for your exams. I'll see you very soon shortly. Goodbye. Jai Hind.